So welcome to the next episode of our In Conversation With, where we speak to a friend of the Bunker, and who better than two of the founding members of the Bunker, Alan Christie and Andy Burden, who were part of the Sunderland Musicians Collective and set up the Bunker and brought the Bunker here where we are now. 38 years ago this month, it was the first gig at this site, and they're here to talk about their time at the Bunker and why they set it up. Thanks for joining us, gents.
No problem.
Thanks, Kenny.
It's for young people now. It's an unnatural kind of thought that a group of young people would get together and develop something like this, or even have an idea and go out there and try and do something and follow their ideas, because they're stuck to their homes. Different time altogether back in the 80s. But you know, what was it like growing up then, and what really inspired you to go and do something about it?
But I think originally, I mean, a lot of us were in bands. I was in a band in the late 70s, early 80s. It was about practice space and lack of and trailing stuff. I mean, we used to practice it at our friends or try to practice at Dr. Youthy, and it'd be skateboards with amps and just like an army trail of ants, loads of little punks carrying bloody heavy stuff, and none of us had a bass. I mean, there was places in the town to practice, Grady Graham's and Peter Perfect Practice's place. The Toy Dolls obviously sing about that kind of stuff, their experience.
Well, it was somewhere affordable to sort of practice and hang out, really, wasn't it? Rather than nightclubs, pubs, and
yeah. I mean, I think it was where you could probably leave your gear. Somebody else could use it. It was that kind of thing where it would be somewhere secure. And again, it's somewhere where you could meet other friends or other people from different estates and things like that. I mean, I think that's how it really started to come about. I mean, it's something would have probably happened without that initial kick. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure whether it would have really happened.
Yeah.
It started through a notice on the Downbrook Centre's door. It's from my first introduction to it, asking for bands to maybe join a collective, and the idea around a collective. And at the time, I think none of us really had an idea what a collective was or what it stood for or anything like that. I mean, a lot of our friends were in bands. I didn't go to the first meeting because it was bands. Our band had broke up. I'm not going to go into why.
So at that point, it was aimed at bands and bands only. Were there people who, weren't in a band but kind of felt part of it, or at that point did they stay out of it, do you think?
No, well, I went to the second meeting. I'd spotted a booger who became a massive part of that early Bunker, especially the SMC. And he said, look, it's a great idea. Mind the bloke's got a beard. No, I'm not joking. And I went to it was the second meeting. And it was all old friends because we'd already knew each other for a few years. I knew guys from Doxy Park from about 78. They were all early SMC members. I knew guys from down here. I knew Booger and them I'd seen the Ruts were Booger a year before. So I knew a few of them for maybe a year or so. They were all in bands. It was like, because your friends were in, you want to be involved. It was, so I suppose you just went along and see how it went. And because it was band-based, a lot of us didn't really get that much involved until we really got Green Terrace.
How old were you all at that point? Like, was everybody around the same age? Were they all peers?
I was 17.
Okay.
I think the age group was probably between 15 and maybe 19. I don't think anybody was in the 20s then. I'm not sure. I don't think there were. All the guys were only a year older than me, maybe 2 years at a push. Some of the guys who had been in earlier punk bands. No, I think that was about the age group. Like, I mean, it's all very young.
And what were people doing in the rest of the time? Work, apprenticeships?
Well, it was obviously the beginning of Thatcherism. Starting to kick in Sunderland. There was still a lot happening in Sunderland. It's not like it is now. I mean, it was full of shops. It was really busy. There was still industry then in the in 80 especially. Yeah. I had I had an apprenticeship at the shipyards. So out of all the guys who had left in 79, a few of us it getting jobs or apprenticeships. But by the time we come to 80, 81, 82, by the time we got Green Terrace Bunker, youth unemployment in Sunderland was 40%. And nationally as well. I mean, I didn't know anybody who had a job. None of them. Me and maybe a couple of others. And that was it. So it was, I think at the time, I think Berger and them were just leaving school that year. So when they first formed the SMC in September 1980 for the first meeting, a lot of those guys had literally just left school. Right. So they were out from school, it was even before, like, youth schemes and stuff like that.
Leave school, sign on the door, that was about it, really, wasn't it?
Yeah. School was shit anyway then.
Yeah. But, so, I mean, that's how different it is to today, where you're forced to go somewhere till you're 18, but that generally, until someone's, back end of 18 and onwards, before then, kids now really don't go out of the house, don't do a great deal, certainly wouldn't be, encouraged to do something like this.
But it's a different generational thing. I mean, we lived outside. I mean, who wanted to be sitting in the house? Who would want to sit in the house? I can't understand that kind of the thought process. It was, you were outside. I mean, we were skateboarders. I was in our one little gang before punk. So punk was perfectly made for us. Little skateboard gang, graduation into punk rock. It was already made for us. It was great. I mean, I never spent any time in the house. Six weeks holidays. I never went home. Camped out for 6 weeks. Never went home, get my team, come out. Yeah. See you later.
So it was, it wasn't the beginning of punk. Was like when was punk as obvious up here in 77, 78, 79?
Oh yeah. Seaburn Hall had the Saints, the Jam. There was venues in the town in 78 that the Lurkers played, Lee's Club, and there was the Polytechnic had quite a few great bands on. The Adverts played in 78.
The Empire even had punk bands still, didn't it?
Yeah, I was at the Bounty Rats when it was when we destroyed the Empire, but that's something else, I suppose. Again, there was loads of bands. I mean, the Wall, some absolutely amazing bands were starting to form and come out of Sunderland then. I was still skateboarding. 77, I was skateboarding, 100% skateboarder. Like punk, wasn't really into punk, didn't dress like a punk. We were skateboarders. Come 78, then the percentage started to change. You would start to be a little bit more punk, a little less skateboard, still skateboarding, mind. And you would start to notice, I think, maybe the beginning of 78, late 77, you would start to see quite a lot of punks in Sunderland, in the town centre or hanging about if you were skateboarding. Because we were meeting different people from different estates, again through, I suppose, being in the skateboard gang, which then continued into punk. We weren't trapped on an estate. We were always wanting to go somewhere else, go to somebody else's youth club. I mean, not to invade it, just go and see your punk mates.
Have a fight with somebody for the next estate.
Well, that would happen anyway. You didn't have to leave your estate for that. So
you were in a band as well, Andy, were you?
Yeah, I played in bands back then. I first came to Sunderland for the first gig in this building. Right, okay. So that was my first visit to Sunderland. I knew people from Sunderland because, by the early 80s, punk had changed a bit, and I suppose we were all inspired by like the Crass-related bands and the anarcho-punk scene. So we got to meet people from Sunderland at other areas of the country, and then ended up coming up here to visit them in the hometown. Right, okay. Which sort of coincided with the first gig at this building.
So, at the meeting of the SMC, didn't go to the first one, but I've seen some of the minutes to the second and third meetings, which are great to read. What you were appointed vice chair quite early on, weren't you?
Well, we first got it was quite a while from the first meeting in 1980. I think through the contacts, I think with Andy Gibson, obviously we had to have help because it was originally the idea came from Andy Gibson, who worked at Ford and Pennywell Coffee Bar.
And somebody had just bumped into him there, or somebody had actually gone and asked him for help?
Berger had told us the story, and it's I was quite took back when I think I first heard it. It was a guy called Donk who'd mentioned Andy Gibson. Why do we not start something? We need somewhere to practice. Donk was in a band called The Cult. Not the Ian Astbury Southern Death Cult, whatever. Band from Pennywell. Pretty good. Donk he'd been about in the scene for quite a while. So it was originally came from him, which I just find astounding because he did fuck all when we started the bunker. So from that, it went to a letter in the Down Book Centre door. Yeah. From there, with Andy Gibson's contacts through the youth club movement in Sunderland, we got the 60 Borough Road. It was like upstairs to I think the community bus garage, right, for the youth club scene. And we did that out first. We had that before we even got Green Terrace. Green Terrace didn't come about till probably, I think, the first meetings with the council about that was probably autumn 81.
I mean, the first one, Borough Road, looks like a shed. Just looks like, you know.
Well, it was. I mean, it was a wreck. It was just an empty building. There was no soundproofing except for carpets nailed to the windows. I stole a load of paint. Well, I didn't steal. My uncle gave us it because he was the storeman at the shipyard. So I asked him, look, we're starting a youthie. It's a punk thing. Can I have some paint? And so through the hole in the fence at the shipyard at Pallion, stored the stuff in the bushes. Me, Andy Gibson, and Mick Campbell went up in the community arts minibus, got the paint out of the bushes, down. I got loads of rollers from the shipyards, and we spent the weekend painting it all out. Didn't last like that because it was graffitied within seconds. But it was a great little place. Like, I mean, it's and not only that, it was just a practice room. So I mean, we used it as like a teaching aid where people could come and learn how to set up PAs and learn like sound systems and mixing and stuff like that. So it becomes a little bit more involved straight from the off. I mean, it's and that kind of group of people who it was people I didn't really know Tommy Eyre or any of them at first. And we got to know guys from down the East End and from loads of different estates. So it wasn't just like a Sunderland like centric centre thing. It was guys from the suburbs, it was from the town, from the East End, from all over the place. I mean, it was even from the north side, which is
unheard of.
Yeah, really unheard of. I mean, it was in them days. It was quite difficult to go somewhere else. To go to somebody else's youth club or something like that.
Everyone was very territorial, weren't they?
Well, it was. I mean, it was very tribal. I mean, it was Silsworth, Farrington. I'm from East Harrington. That was at war. The police came to the school. It was so bad. The police come to the school on loads of different occasions saying, we'll arrest you all. We know you all are. We know who's fighting. It was nuts. Absolutely nuts. I'd been beat up loads of times. Dragged off a bus by silky lads. Absolutely kicked to bits. Nobody helped us because I was a punk. Just got back in the bus. Oh, God.
I mean, obviously, some of the photos I've seen of Borough Road, including ones of Tommy running a workshop, and I didn't realise that the workshops were such a big part of it in the early days. How were they, you know, how were the idea come about? How were they promoted, and how were the people recruited onto it?
Like community arts project, I mean, there's a lot of youth worker involvement, weren't there? Like help, it weren't just people doing things for themselves, although they were doing things for themselves, but there was the community arts project from Hendon and Ford and Pennywell projects that sort of all them youth workers knew each other, didn't they? They were all friends, and they brought a lot of people together, really, didn't they?
Well, hopefully, I've spoken to Gaynor, a few of the guys from that era, and they were looking for a project to run where they could politicise young people within Sunderland. That was what was happening in the late 70s and the early 80s, especially I think with Thatcherism really starting to kick in. I think that youth club group were looking for somebody like that. Right. They'd found us. We were already politicised, so it was just like
serendipity.
But like Andy says, it was they give us direction, but let us have free rein. It was just like maybe a talking shop of ideas. That's a great idea. We'll go with that. So it was mutual consent amongst I suppose that's how collectives are formed. I mean, it's not one person's idea. It's a group idea, and it really seemed to work. I mean, I think I was quite blown away by it at first. I mean, I think that kind of cliquey punk thing with different punk groups from different areas. Even though you got on, it was like sometimes just like, God, they're arseholes. And like Andy says, I mean, we were starting to get into more of the political scene, the crass and that kind of anarchist scene. And it just seemed to just absolutely just suit that. The
timing was just perfect.
Just absolutely perfect for us. I mean, it couldn't have come along at a better time. I mean, especially for Youth of Sunderland. I mean, it was all of those early kind of things. What took off then was all by a collective thought and process. It was through meetings and discussion. It wasn't just like, hey, we're all going to do this. Yeah. It was like, what do you think? Do you think this will be great?
Yeah. So it seemed initially when I did my history and research, years ago, was that it seemed like a long time, but it wasn't really that long before Borough Road ended and Green Terrace started. Yet it probably felt like a lifetime, you say, because there were that many meetings. How long was that the negotiations going on for Green Terrace once?
Well, say what happened was starting to get noticed by the local press and the Echo and Tyne TV. They did a little pop documentary on Check It Out about the Sunderland Musicians Collective. I've still got it on tape. It's still pretty good. It was that kind of involvement with Anne Dumble from the Down Book Centre. She released the Northeast NE1 compilation, which has got really basically nothing to do with the Musicians Collective from Sunderland. It's it's a loose group of bands that used to visit her shop, and that's what it is. It's got very little to do with it. So by the time, again, we'd had that kind of exposure from the media, the council at the same time were kicking us out of Borough Road because of noise complaint.
Oh, okay.
It was loud. You could hear bands practicing from maybe the Mowbray. Borough Road was it. Well, the practice rooms were, none of it exists now. It's just where the new health centre is now, down at the bottom of Hendon. Yeah. That's where it was like. And it was.
And there'll have been a lot of houses around there.
Oh, it was all houses. Covent Garden was opposite. It was like one of the Garths. I think when you look at photographs of it, it so looks like in the 1940s or the 1930s, and in reality, it's 1981. It's so dated. It's the whole area was quite dilapidated. So for anybody to complain, I just really don't understand.
So did you think that was the chance that it was going to just rugby pulled, or be despite as the noise complaints coming in, you had an idea, right, we're going to get somewhere else?
Well,
I mean, was it at all seen as a nuisance, or was it like, well, no, it's just not fit for purpose?
Well, the building wasn't really fit for purpose at the time. I think the council give us that chance to try and, whether they were going to say, do you know what, we've given them a chance, and do you know what, those guys had failed, you know what I mean, they're just punks. But in reality, we're all focused, we knew what we were doing, we were pretty good at having committees, it was all minted. Again, it's community arts, it's Andy Gibson, it's all that kind of input from those guys. Yeah. It's in their contacts. Say there's nobody in the world would give it wasn't just punks. I can't just say punks all the time, because it wasn't just punks. It was mods. It was all kinds of different people. Nobody would give, in the right mind, a load of kids a Victorian school just to run by themselves. That's the case, but that's what happened. Yeah. And it was only probably because of our involvement with community arts and Andy Gibson and Ford and Pennywell Coffee Bar and all that kind of support group behind us. We wouldn't have gotten that. I mean, you wouldn't expect to get that. I mean, not even now you wouldn't expect to get that. I mean,
was that obvious at the time? Did you realise, or did you still feel as if?
Well, no. I mean, it's just, you know what, you're just living for the moment. Yeah. At that time, it was a good thing, because we had somewhere to practice. People had somewhere to practice. You could go and see your friends. You could sit with them. You could watch them practice. It was big enough, but it wasn't that kind of big focal point. What I think we needed, and again, like I say, with us getting that kind of media interest, the council probably had thought, do you know what? These guys are making a go of it. Like, they've released an LP. They've been on TV. They're in the Echo bloody nearly every week. It seems to be, it suited them because, again, political friends against our common enemy of conservatism and Thatcherism, and the kind of things what you could see what was starting to happen to the town then. By 82, we'd had the keys to the bunker.